Good afternoon, honorable members. When the business of the House suspended this morning, the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador was on the floor. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You going to later?
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro.
Mr. Speaker, before the House adjourned, I'd risen on a point of order, and I'd indicated to this honorable House that I would present or lay to the House a copy of the Bahamas Financial Services Board, the Bahamas Approach to the Common Reporting Standards Government Briefing Document 2007, which basically gives the history of the Bahamas' relations with groupings within the EU, namely the OECD, America, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, FATCA, and a number of things that have happened from 2018. Mr. Speaker, I'd indicated then that the chronology, the events as they were being laid may not have given a clear picture of what actually occurred, and that what is happening now is not of recent vintage, but it has a history. But Mr. Speaker, I am guided by, one, the statement made by Exuma and Ragged Island, where Exuma and Ragged Island, on behalf of the Progressive Liberal Party, after the blacklifting gave, I want to commend him for that, for saying that, and what he said was in line with the industry position, that there should be a national approach to this matter, because it's significantly important to the survival of the financial services industry. And Mr. Speaker, in this report on page 5, you have the industry, the CEO, Ms. Tanya McCartney, and Executive Director of the Bahamas Financial Services Board, saying then, under the previous administration, that this matter ought not to be politicized due to its importance to the country. And so, Mr. Speaker, without more, I will lay this document. I will not go to place blame or to speak to the efficiency or lack thereof of the former administration, but I would just lay it, Mr. Speaker, for the information of this House and for the other side to see. But what I would want to reiterate is what my government has said, what the leader of government business has said, and the shadow minister for finance, and what the industry partners said in May 2017, given this briefing, is that this matter is so significant and it's so important. We must rise to a different level, and we have to deal with it in a way that would bring benefit to the Bahamas. So I will just sign the document and provide it to you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, first of all, I think the intervention of the member for Yamakro, if I read it correctly, despite all that might have been said, was that he was assuring, he wanted to be assured that this matter does not become a political football. And he could be assured, that will be not, that our spokespersons on matters of financial issues and the financial service industry, has spoken on our behalf, and therein lies our position. We stand ready, as we did when the cry was first made by the Prime Minister, for us to remain united on this matter. When he first mentioned it in, I think it was during the budget debate or thereabouts, he said we agreed that we should be. But very quickly, we were being blamed. It started with the member from St. Anne's. We were being castigated. So I think it's only right for me to just put the record straight. And that's what I'm attempting to do. And the position of the Progressive Party is as that has been stated in the press release that was issued last evening on this matter. And it does not take away from what I'm about to say or have been saying as to how we are where we are today. Because I pointed out to the member from Yamacraw some of the comments that were contained in the communication by the Prime Minister on the 13th of September, because I still have it. And I just wanted to let him know sometimes when we speak, things do come back to bite you. And I think it is also necessary that we as the government, we don't know everything. We obviously reach out to others to advise us and to educate us. And those of us who may know something about some things ought to share that knowledge. And so, whereas I've been talking about the multilateral and the bilateral, well, basically, in simple terms, it was the European Union and the OECD wanting us to comply with what they call the common reporting, the CRS, the common reporting standards on tax matters, as opposed to us as a jurisdiction having separate standards with each of our participating jurisdictions, and where most of the world countries had gone. And so, and as I said, Mr. Speaker, the whole aim was for me to try just to correct any false innuendos, right? And particularly about this issue. And so, so it is concerning and ought to be concerning that if the Prime Minister, for example, confirmed, and as the member from Yamacraw has endorsed the confirmation that upon assuming office, the impending threats were made known to the government. And then the Prime Minister also spoke about their strenuous, and his words, their strenuous and decisive efforts to avoid it, having had notice of an impending blacklisting, then the question has to be asked, why are we some 9 months later being blacklisted? I mean, that's an honest and reasonable question to ask. And particularly when, in the same communication, the Prime Minister assured all of us, and I was elated to communicate that to some of the persons in the industry with whom I have contact, that, and I quote the Prime Minister, we have thus moved away from the threat of being blacklisted. That's what he said on the 13th of December. And the other question, and he confirmed after the 13th of December, in his national address, he again said, and I quote, to protect our financial service industry, we took decisive action to avoid being blacklisted by the EU and the OECD. So the question does arise, Mr. Speaker, then how come? And then the question could be, well, and could it, and it may not be the government or maybe the technocrats, but a question could have been asked. Was it the sluggish? And I'm borrowing some language here, which I shared with the member from Yamacraw. I'm borrowing this language. Could I now say that the sluggish and lazy response of this government have put our country on a dangerous and disastrous course? Question. Because, the suggestion for the blacklisting is failure at a high political level. And, Speaker, I don't think it's necessary for me to refer to the letter that was written to the government in respect to that matter. What date that was written? Yeah. That was written on the 26th of January, 2008, where they, and you see, Mr. Speaker, what is interesting, 2018, sorry. What is interesting, and again, that's why it behooves all of us to be a part of how we respond to this. The concerns of the European Union and the group they call the Code of Conduct, the Code of Conduct group, they don't expect us, the deadline for resolving the issues that they are concerned about is not until December 31st, 2018. We're still somewhat 9 months away. But yet still, we're being blacklisted. That's why I'm saying that the goalposts continue to move, right? And that's in this letter, right? And so what they required of us, is for us to give some commitment by February 2018. That's what the letter said. Now, I did note in the press release interview by the Minister of Finance that a letter was in fact sent in time, but it may have been signed by the wrong person. He then followed up and signed it himself. Well, clearly, maybe the content of the letter, or the substance of the letter, did not meet what they thought amounted to a commitment. So I don't know, because we were not party to it. But here again, as I said, we need to engage persons to assist in this. And again, I just hope that this is that there'll be no further blaming of the PLP on these matters. And as I said, I repeat, we stand ready to work with the government on a national strategy to protect this industry and the Bahamian workers who are in the industry. And another thing on talking about protecting the workers in the industry, financial services industry, I'm advised that, and I don't know whether the Ministry of Labor, this came to the attention of the government, but last evening I was advised that there are about 9 Bahamians that are going to be let go from Pictet Bank. I don't know whether that came from a reliable source, so I'm prepared to speak to it because of the source from which it came. And that source also indicated that the same bank was separating itself from these Bahamian workers, 9 Bahamian workers, are applying for work permits. Right, so I think work permits, I don't know the kind of work permits. I just said I'm only advised that they're applying for work permits. This is where governments ought to at least get an understanding of what is happening to the industry with the bank, and to determine why is it that they would need work permits and at the same time laying off the Bahamian workers. And that is the role of a government in protecting our Bahamian workers. And in this regard, too, Mr. Speaker, as I pointed out earlier, there are many in the private sector and in the community who would wish to assist the government in attempting to have us delisted. And I think we have to consider whether or not this blacklisting at this time have regard to what when we are really obliged to make the necessary arrangements, not until December 18th, whether this blacklisting is just not a strong tactic to push us to do some things that may, at the end of the day, be harmful to us and our industries. So we have to weigh that as well. I would recommend, as I said, that we seek persons out in the community who could assist in this. A name that comes to mind is our former Attorney General, Alfred Sears, recalling that in 2002, when we came into office, there were a lot of issues looming large in respect to listing and delisting, and we were listed in some of the areas, and he worked assiduously to ensure our delisting. So you may wish to have him come on board to assist in this regard. I invite you to consider engaging, no doubt, the expertise he would have acquired whilst he's Attorney General in dealing with this matter, to see how he could assist in this regard. Mr. Speaker, I then move to a question of our national health. I've said before, and I say it again, the PLP's policy prescription for decisively addressing the country's national health needs is national health insurance. We have always remained clear about that. 10 months into this government's tenure of governance, Bahamians are still unsure, uncertain about this government's plans to address this critical need. Bahamians have been subjected to a PR campaign on national health care. This included reported free surgeries by the health minister, all with a steady dose of detailed descriptions of what they term a national health crisis. These are not policy solutions, Mr. Speaker. Detailed descriptions of a national health crisis are not policy solutions, Mr. Speaker. And while we are detailing and describing the national health crisis, there's a dire shortage of beds in the public health system, resulting in critically and chronically ill patients being sent home prematurely. As part of the PLP's revenue enhancement measures, Mr. Speaker, some time ago, heavy taxes, popularly characterized as sin taxes, were assessed on alcoholic drinks and tobacco products. We did that some time ago. So today on this side, we don't believe that additional taxation of these products will provide a sustainable funding mechanism to defray the costs of national critical and chronic or secondary and tertiary health care delivery services. The PLP, Mr. Speaker, engaged in a number of exercises, all in preparation for the access and delivery of universal health care to all Bahamians as a human right and not a privilege. Some of the things that we did in preparation for this access was to complete it and open the critical care block. We refurbished satellite health clinics across the archipelago. We extended operating hours of selected clinics, expanded and deployed medical doctors in many family island communities, expanded the operational capacity of the Rand Memorial Hospital, we opened the mini hospitals in Exuma and Abaco, and we commenced construction renovation clinics throughout the archipelago. As I remind them, I want my clinics built in Cat Island, Kearns, and Salvador, and executed contracts for the enhancement of the maternity, male and female wards. That was all part in preparation for the access of the delivery of universal health care to all Bahamians. And as I repeat, not as a privilege, Mr. Speaker, but as a human right. We believe, Mr. Speaker, that every citizen of the Bahamas has a right to the delivery of universal health care. And we don't see it as a privilege. Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, expect the successive governments to build on gains made by their predecessors or provide justifiable and workable alternative solutions. So I think the Bahamians expected this government to build on the gains that we made in respect to the health care system and access to universal health care. And if they were not going to do so, at least provide a justifiable and workable alternative solution. But to date, the FNM government has provided neither. And we find this, and I say it's disgraceful. And it further substantiates the fact that they were woefully unprepared to govern. There's a distinct difference, Mr. Speaker, between political campaigning and actual governance. For our part, the former Minister of Health put in place a solid, workable plan and there's no need to reinvent the wheel, but to simply build on a foundation of progress. I say to them, quit the moaning and the groaning and fix the outstanding problems. Secure the required beds to accommodate sick people who are in serious need of medical care. I implore the Minister of Health to move post-haste, cease all the talk and the stats and the academic renditions, right? Our people want action, a resolution to this crisis, and not long talk filled with empty promises. Further, if you can't fish, then with all due respect, please get out of the boat. Right, Speaker? Now, since I hear the member from I am sticking me all day. I'll say something to him. Mr. Mr. Speaker, it was reported in the media that extreme weather conditions have now made it difficult and some say impossible for residents in the north southern region to move about the island by land. Many of us have viewed video footage on social media of water gushing across Queens Highway. The highway having been split in two in an area called the Sand Pit. Information coming to our attention raised some serious questions about the circumstances surrounding this environmental disaster. And Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I wish to raise these issues as I seek clarification and answers for the general public. Can the member for North Eleuthera assist this Parliament in providing the name of the owner of the sand pit dredging operation at the sand pit? Will the Prime Minister confirm if a permit was granted to operate a sand pit? If yes, then when was the permit granted? Was there ever excavation of sand to a depth of 14 feet below the surface of the road in the vicinity of the sandpit and Queens Highway, where the road was split in two. And Minister of Works, you should have received a report from your engineers. You could confirm whether or not the excavation of the sand and the operation of the sandpit in the area adjacent to Queens Highway, whether that contributed significantly, if not directly, to the road being split in two by the sea. I hope to get those answers before then. Right? Speaker. It's no secret that the power generation and distribution systems owned and operated by the government, owned Bahamas Power and Light, are unreliable today. BPL. The amended Electricity Act, the Bond Reduction Act, the BPL business plan, together with the National Energy Policy, laid out a way forward for the reform for both BPL and the energy sector generally. I note, however, that the recent $100 billion bond issue by the Bahamas government to upgrade or replace BPL's power plants and aging distribution network failed to address the legacy debt, which should be around $500 billion or just below. So the question is, what is the status on retiring this debt? What is the status of self-generated power and net metering program? What is the status of that? What is the new timeline for BPL to reduce its electricity costs by the 30% and for the introduction of alternative energy sources? And perhaps the government could advise whether they have abandoned our relationship and alternative energy commitment through the Carbon War Room initiative. And if not, on what island and when can we expect the first Family Island pilot program to commence as part of the Island Challenge? Mr. Speaker, if any among us doubted that these recent forensic audits of public accounts at various public corporations commissioned by the FNM government were anything more than glorified and expensive witch hunts, the recent water and sewage audit should eliminate all doubt. For the information of this House and for the consumption of the general public, I refer to specifics of the matter of the Ernst & Young EY forensic audit of the Water and Sewage Corporation, which was tabled last week in this House and elaborately commented on by the chairman of the Water and Sewage Corporation, the member for Long Island. Mr. Speaker, this is the most sordid and libelous report, which has made its way into the ancient records of this place. For me, it is distressing because it touches on matters that are extremely personal to me, as morbid references were made to my dear departed mother, whose third anniversary of interment will be next week, Tuesday. They also, through innuendos, attacked a lady, Mrs. Merlene Poitier, who was worked as a legal secretary for many years in the firm of Davis & Co. And before that, you know, because Davis & Co. evolved. It was Christie Ingram & Co., then Christie Davis & Co., and then it became Davis & Co. I'll tell the story about that one day. She has, Mr. Speaker, she has an impeccable reputation in the ranks of legal secretaries, only to be sullied by persons with biased, prejudicial, and puerile minds. As members would know, this is the second report by EY, both of which appear to be targeted at me and my role as Minister for Works in the last administration. On the BPL side, there was an allegation, a suggestion that a contract had been given to my brother by BPL, basically at my instance, or with my condonation, which turned out to be patently false, and a public apology, which I accepted, had to be tendered to me by the Minister of Works. It is vexing that I now tackle this latest saga from the government. Last week, Thursday, the Minister of Works, the member from Carmichael, before the commencement of the sitting, mentioned to me that my name had come up in the latest EY report. I asked him, well, in what circumstances? He refused to indicate. And I just wondered, why would you tell me then? If you were going to tell me in what circumstances? I suspect, I guess, he didn't want to tell me the circumstances because if I were to tell him, if I'd given him a response to any of those, then I would not be able to say, well, I would not be able to say that I told you you should go and have them corrected. But by the time he was telling me that, the report had already been published. Because it's been published, it's dated to February 9th, 2018, and that was the first of March, and he's mentioning that to me. And he said, he thought it was his duty to let me know. Fine. And he was discharging his duty. Well, once he mentioned it to me, it moved me to having regard to my previous experience, to write to the global the global chairman and chief executive officer of Ernst & Young EY Global in London. I'm going to read this letter, Mr. Speaker, and have it entered in the records of this honorable House. It's addressed to Mr. Mark Weinberger, Global Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Ernst & Young Global, 6 Mall, London Place, London, United Kingdom. Subject, request for peer review of Bahamas Strategic Business Unit audit practices. Dear Mr. Weinberger, I write in reference to the engagement of the local office of Ernst & Young Strategic Business Unit by the government of the Bahamas to conduct forensic audits of public accounts of government ministries and selected corporations. As you might be aware, I was publicly named in a recent audit conducted by Ernst & Young and accused of wrongdoing, specifically a conflict of interest citation in my capacity as a cabinet minister in the area of contract administration in relation to a government corporation, the Bahamas Power and Light. which was assigned to the portfolio of the Ministry of Works, a ministerial post held by me between 2012 and 2017. I was never notified or allowed the opportunity to respond to this so-called audit finding. This finding or citation proved to be false, and the current Minister of Works admitted to the error and issued an unqualified public apology to me only after the charges were vigorously refuted by me with supporting documentation. On the face of it, there appeared to be a gap in the procedures used during the forensic audit, as a simple phone call or an interview could have diffused the entire redundant matter and the confusion and embarrassment it caused. This matter is presently before my legal counsel for advice and action if it is determined that it is appropriate in the circumstances. Notwithstanding this error, there are hints and innuendos by the Prime Minister and other ministers of his government that I was again involved in wrongdoing during the same period, 2012 to 2017, resulting from a forensic audit finding conducted by Ernst & Young at the government-owned Water and Sewage Corporation. In both cases, I was not extended the courtesy of a phone call or an interview in the interest of fairness and balance. Sir, I do not have to tell you that forensic audits and the published findings can and have had far-reaching implications for individuals, institutions, both public and private, governments, and by extension, society. For this reason, I am respectfully requesting a peer review of the standard auditing and reporting procedures, practices, and processes of your Bahamas-based strategic business unit. It is my view that given the current politically divisive environment in which we live, an objective test for quality control, uniformity, consistency, independence, and the elimination of the perception, appearance, or suspicion of any political influence over the highly technical and scientific work of Ernst & Young is necessary in the circumstances. I hasten to point out that the work of your organization has consistently met the rigorous international accounting and auditing standards. And I dare say your company's global brand was built on consistently meeting these high standards of professionalism. I respectfully request that you take the appropriate actions in a spirit of goodwill to jealously guard Ernst & Young's global brand. It is no secret that I have accused the Free National Movement government of a witch hunt against the political organization that I now lead, the opposition Progressive Liberal Party. If perchance the Free National Movement government is engaged in a high-profile witch hunt in this instance, it is necessary that Ernst & Young is not seen or perceived to be facilitating such an exercise in any form or fashion. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Mr. Speaker, as you can see, the key elements of my letter was to formally request a peer review of standard operational, accounting, and auditing practice of EY because I perceived that the local strategic business unit was unwittingly allowing itself to be used as pawns in a high-stakes, high-profile political witch hunt by the F&M government. I was not invited to comment on the accusations raised by the audit, not even a telephone call. And yet the report has brazenly been put forward as being an established fact. This report by EY indicates a true lack of professionalism and is an attempt at assassination of characters by hired hands, mercenaries. This report could not be the work of true professionals. At best, it is that of a side-con organization holding itself out as a professional organization. The entire report is riddled with unsubstantiated statements and innuendos. Mr. Speaker, the EY report is a slapdash piece of work designed to aid the government in their ongoing witch hunt of individuals and the game of naming and shaming. It has unfairly maligned senior members of the management of the Water and Sewage Corporation and has damaged their professional standing. How can the present chairman and board expect to work with these same individuals in a professional and above-board approach when they have been so spitefully savaged? The report is badly flawed and cannot stand. I would think that the report should be withdrawn forthwith and apologies issued all around. I must go on record, Mr. Speaker, as condemning the performance and presentation of the member for Long Island, the chairman of Water and Sewage. His behavior was deplorable and puerile. It was something that we would expect from a high school debate. He appears to take delight in bringing out sordid details and appears to have no sense of public propriety. As a new member and a young member.
Honorable member.
Huh?
I would suggest that you be a little careful with the words. Those words are kind of
I could borrow some.
Offensive.
Yeah, I could. I could borrow some from you. I could borrow some.
I don't think you want to borrow my words.
Borrow some, huh? I could. Listen. No, you're dealing with me now. See, he was talking about me. He was talking about me. All right? I don't know, Mr. Speaker, if I say it's deplorable and puerile, I don't see it. That's, both of those words to me are parliamentary. High school debate, that's an opinion. He takes delight in bringing out sort of details, that's an opinion. That's watching him. He seemed to be enjoying himself and getting off on it. Right? And my view, Mr. Speaker, is that he didn't seem to have a sense. He didn't seem to have a sense of public
Honorable member.
Yeah?
Member for Bamboo. The chair recognizes the member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the distinguished leader of the opposition wouldn't want that to stay on the record of the House.
Which one?
The fact that the member was getting off.
Oh, that's withdrawn. Pull back, man. I pull out. No, they've asked me to pull it out, so it's done. It's withdrawn. As a new member and a young member, I should only wish to caution him that time is longer than rope, and what today he is so gleeful about can in a very short while prove to be his nightmare. I'm sure that the good people of Long Island did not elect him to be the avenging angel of wrath. In his daily conduct of the affairs of Water and Sewage Corporation, and by his performance by this place, his stature, in my estimation, has steadily diminished. Now, before I leave this matter, EY, just to show the sloppiness and the mischief that they intended to create. They said they observed some emails. And this is where the member for Long Island was talking with some guardian angel. And the innuendo was that I was the guardian angel. And because I directed $1 million to be paid to the account of NID, the contractor. That is the direct the innuendo is drawn by, and he was riding on this guardian angel. Well, he's an avenging, I prefer being a guardian angel than what you call an avenging angel of wrath. Right? It's not true. And there's nothing in the emails for EY to even suggest it. Right? So if you go to page 7 of the report. Right, Mr. Speaker. So the small one, what they purport, they say, email discussions, and what's the cuteness of the words, and what it was designed to do, to create the mischief. Email discussions observed between Water and Sewage Management and Ministry of Finance. Now, look, they say Ministry of Finance. They don't say Ministry of Finance personnel. They just say Ministry of Finance. And then it goes on, and the Ministry of Public Works suggests that someone within the government was directing this payment to be made despite the clear objections from Water and Sewage and Ministry of Public Works personnel. See, they used the word personnel when it came down to Ministry of Public Works, but they don't use the word personnel when it comes down to Water and Sewage. Right? So they leave the minister out there so that the inference could be drawn. And as though, it was far-reaching for them to reach this. Read it yourself. It's far-reaching for them to reach to the point that the member for Long Island could call me a guardian angel as though I directed this payment. And when you read the email that they lifted, the word direct, a derivative of the word directing is in it. The word in the email is directed. But it was directed. But what the email says, it's an email to Simon Wilson from Colin Higgs, the permanent secretary. It says, and Colin Higgs is saying to Mr. Simon Wilson, the permanent secretary, when it came to my attention that an officer in the Ministry of Finance was directed to request my ministry to facilitate payment. That's what the email is saying. So an officer in the Ministry of Finance was being directed by someone to make contact. Yeah, but you see, that's a good question. E&Y should ask who? E&Y didn't go and speak to Colin Higgs. He didn't go and speak to Simon Wilson to identify the who. A good question. That's a businessman, right? Businessman would ask that question, right? That's what, so, Mr. Speaker, so let me just say, Mr. Speaker, right? So, Mr. Speaker, anyone who read and understanding of this email, that was clearly demonstrates the mischief that the audit exercise was engaged to create. It was storytelling without regard to the truth, as it was clearly disingenuous to suggest that someone within the government was directing this payment. The email lifted was sent by the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Works, where he wrote about an officer in the Ministry of Finance being directed to request the Ministry of Works to facilitate the payment. I was the Minister of Works, and quite frankly, I wish I could have given directions to officers in the Ministry of Finance. I wish I could have. I could have gotten a lot more things done. But that just could not happen. Never. Well, they have the files, they could tell you. Ask them, right? Right? And that's how the chairman, I say, starts speaking about the guardian angel. I don't know who is he talking about, but there's no doubt it could not be me in this regard. You see, Mr. Speaker, it was very easy for EY to speak to the permanent secretary, just as the Guardian did the other day. The Guardian called him, I note from the newspaper, and he's able to clear the matter up. But they didn't do that. They could have called Mr. Higgs and asked about this email. Like I said, just as the Guardian did, but they didn't. Right? Mr. EY could have spoken to Simon Wilson. And again, I'm advised that that did not happen. Or they could have spoken to me, Mr. Speaker. They never spoke to me. Mr. Speaker, these inquiries would or could have deterred them from the salacious innuendos and specter of wrongdoing by the views expressed in this report. That's all they needed to do. Go along, Mr. Speaker. You know, this brings me to the issue of the unnecessary reference to the one share of 5,000 shares held by Mrs. Poitier, who I spoke about earlier. And again, the disinterring of my mother's bones to connect her to me. See, EY confirmed, you know, that they reviewed the corporate registry files at the registry. And they did it to ascertain who the owners are of this company. You know, they discovered that this company was incorporated. They would have discovered that this company was incorporated since 8th of July 2004. But they don't mention that, right? They would have discovered, and they did not mention, that it was incorporated by Joan Ferguson and Co. They would have discovered, but they did not mention, that the shares at the time was owned by Anthony Ferguson of 4,700, and Krallis 150, and Joan Ferguson 150. They are the owners of the affairs on record. That after 8th of August, the shareholding seemed to change, where Avery Ferguson, the late Avery Ferguson, God rest his soul, owned 2,400 of the shares, Anthony Ferguson another 2,400, and Joan Ferguson yet another 150. But they don't mention this historical fact to determine ownership, because that, you know, that ain't gonna help the narrative. That ain't gonna create the mischief. That ain't sufficient for what I call the salacious innuendos. Right, and then on the 28th of May, after then, it was owned 4,998 by Joan Ferguson, by Anthony Ferguson again, and then Joan Ferguson 2. Later on, it was 4,997 Anthony Ferguson, Sean Smith 2, and Joan Ferguson 1. If you're concerned about all the ownership, right? Now, what's interesting? The registered office or the registered agency, that moved, you know. It moved from Joan Ferguson to Commonwealth Law Advocate. And I'm sure the Minister of Works is aware, knows that firm, right? And no, right? No, I don't. No, not yet. You have the opportunity. I didn't mention, no, I said, yeah.
For full clarification, I was the managing partner of Commonwealth Law Advocates until 2006. I understand that company may have come to that firm after I ceased to be a partner member, some years later, and I'm sure that
I didn't.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You might know the company.
But you indicate I might know the company. I
mean, talking about it, you went.
I have said, Speaker, I have said on many occasions in this place that the leader officer is my friend, and he would not make innuendos like that about me. I don't know anything about the company.
I didn't say you know.
The company would not have come there at that law firm at the time when I was there. And I'm sure that he will do the reasonable thing and clarify that.
Yeah, okay, let's look at what I said the agency moved from Joan Ferguson to Commonwealth Law Advocate. And that was on the 19th of June, 2012. That's what I said, right? I said that date. And I said, the member from Carmichael will know about that law firm. That's all I said, nothing more, nothing less. And he's clarified the position. Right, that's all I said. And we know that Ruth O'Dowell, for certain, is the is the lawyer in the firm. And, you know, they could have spoken to her. They could have. Right? When the member for Long Island, when I suspect he realized what he had found himself in, started to speak to me about this matter, I said, at the very least, EY should have spoken to Ruth Bodava, the law firm. And she said, and if there was any question, she would have been able to clear it up. He said, no, well, you see, that's what he told me. He said, well, they called her. I said, no, they didn't call her because I spoke to her. And she said, nobody called her, but if they are willing, she would be prepared to call it, right? Oh. No, that's no private conversation. No, I know what to have my private conversation, right? And this has to do with me now, where he has been calling me guardian angel, where he made a suggestion that as the guardian angel, I cost $1 million to be paid, and that I may have benefited from it because a secretary that works in my office was an owner, right? So why should I can't have any private conversation in respect to that when I don't when all of it is false and not true, right? And so, Mr. Speaker, right? So the member for Long Island should go back to EY and ask them whether or not they were misleading him. But you know, Mr. Speaker, that this issue has really raised another real question, and perhaps in our discussions in trying to craft the way forward to this delisting, to delisting from the blacklisting, we want to consider some of this fact. You know, the concept of shareholdings in companies, lawyers will know, accounting firms will know, that first of all, the legal regime, the corporate laws, first of all, required you to have, initially it used to be 5 members. You had to have 5 members to enable you to incorporate a company. And invariably, you would have nominee shareholders along with the beneficial owner.
Honorable member. Honorable member for Yamakro.
So, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker.
Yamakro.
Stop my time then. So, Mr. Speaker, and as I said, in crafting the way forward, and this occurs to me now. It occurs to me now that we should.
On a point of order? Yes, Mr. Honorable member, forget that. State the infringement.
Several. The member has chosen to mislead the House. He has attacked me in an unparliamentary manner as a member of this place. Mr. Speaker, I sat there listening to him on the drive here. You see, I'm still panting. I wanted to catch him on his feet. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the Progressive Liberal Party, the member for Cat Island, a senior member in this place, the best way he could respond is to refer to me using unparliamentary, undignified terms. And Mr. Speaker, I would request that you have the member withdraw that description of me.
Honorable
you know
member,
the ones.
Do you indicate to the chair specifically if you have a note of it?
Mr. Speaker, I was driving, so I didn't get to catch everything. I left the office and immediately made my way here. But puerile and other unparliamentary language he used. Mr. Speaker, the member also said that we spoke, and I told him that EY spoke to Ms. Ruth Bodavel. Mr. Speaker, when we spoke about his mom's obituary being included as an exhibit, and I told him, in fact, prior to our speaking, I told him, I got up and said that I would not have personally placed his mother's obituary in that report, but that EY felt that they needed to include that, it seems, as proof, as evidence of what they were saying. But I told him that I would not have done so, and I said that openly. Yet he comes behind and does this. Cat Island, the member for Cat Island. They're far from Long Island, my brother. Far from Long Island. He references a letter, Mr. Speaker. He references a letter or some email by Mr. Colin Higgs. And also he referenced a news report by Mr. Higgs. Now in the EY report, which I will go to shortly, in the EY report, it spoke to what Mr. Higgs said.
Be more specific. So,
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Higgs wrote an email stating his objection to the $1 million payment, right? On Monday, I believe, it was in the newspapers, one of the dailies, stating that that the member for Cat Island had expressed some concerns. Mr. Speaker, there is no record, no email, no letter on file from the member for Cat Island expressing any concerns about that $1 million payment or the $800,000 payment that was before. No email, no letter, just word of mouth. Okay? Just the member for Cat Island's word and that of his former permanent secretary, now retired. With respect to shares, Mr. Speaker, I hear the member talking.
Is this part of your
clarity? I want to clarify. This was in my speech, Mr. Speaker. Okay. And the member for Cat Island alluded to it a short while ago. Mr. Speaker, everybody who practices law knows that when it comes to shares, and I'm not saying that this is the case here in terms of whether it's issued or not, but when it comes to shares, I can hold 4,999. Someone else can hold 1. What matters, Mr. Speaker, is how many of those shares were actually issued. Okay? And the member would know, in this case, with respect to Ms. Poitier, his secretary, of, I think it's some 30 years, his law firm was not the registered office, nor was his firm the office that incorporated NID. And it is the norm for law firms to nominate someone if they are incorporating someone or something within their office. Within their office. He got up here and he admitted, Mr. Speaker, the member for Cat Island, I apologize, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm feeling very passionate right now. I had a long ride here. The member for Cat Island, Mr. Speaker, did not explain all of that. But what he did say is, 1, that the company was not incorporated by his law firm, and now the company has a second registered office, which is also not his law firm. So in the first instance, Mr. Speaker, his law firm didn't incorporate the company. In the second instance, his law firm has never been the registered office for the company, but his secretary is a nominee shareholder in that company. Okay? And Mr. Speaker, you being an attorney yourself, I'm sure that you can have an appreciation for what I am saying. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I ask that the member withdraws his unparliamentary description of me. He's supposed to be a leader in this place, Mr. Speaker. Call me the junior member from Long Island. He's the grandfather of the House, Mr. Speaker. At least he can show the junior member for Long Island some kind of guidance. Show me the right way. Because if I'm fortunate enough to be here the time he has been here, I would not want to do this to another junior member. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker, I think we discussed the issues of what was parliamentary or not parliamentary, and I don't intend to go over that. In response to Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, you on a point of order again?
Yes,
What's the point of, what did I say?
again, Mr. Speaker, I contend that, and you can rule, I contend that the member's commentary was unparliamentary, and he should withdraw it. I think it's in breach of the rules, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members,
You did ask him to
I
identify the words that he was speaking about.
right.
And I will give consideration as to whether I will withdraw it. You won't have to ask you the rule. If he tells you what it is he wants you to withdraw.
I don't recall the exact words, so what the chair would do is request, would defer any decision with respect to those words and request a
But
copy
he has
of.
not identified the words. You asked him to identify what words he wished to be withdrawn. See, I have no, Mr. Speaker, I don't propose to belabor what I have to do or say here with any distractions. And if it is any word that you find to be unparliamentary that I may have said in relation to the member, I withdraw them. I go further to say, though, that if the junior member would afford to the senior member the kind of respect that he's asking me to afford to him, he likewise will get it.
Respect is
But
earned, Mr. Speaker.
I accept that. And I did not earn him his to have gone after me the way he did in his speech. And he has yet to earn mine, hence I get it. So
Honorable
I go
members.
further.
Mr. Speaker.
I'm a speaker. I go to a more
Mr. Speaker.
salient point.
Are you on a point of order? Honorable member for Cat Island. The member for Long Island is on a point of order. Let us try.
You continue. You get to finish it. I don't get to answer.
Honorable member for Long Island.
Mr. Speaker.
Let us try to resolve this.
Again, the member is speaking in unparliamentary terms. The senior member, Mr. Speaker. And I would urge him to curb that unparliamentary enthusiasm.
Yes, lead by example.
Speaker, let's go back to where I am on this matter. On this issue, in respect to what I call the nominee shareholder issue, perhaps the time may come, and this is a matter that the government would wish to take into consideration when they are crafting the response to complying with the request of the Committee on the Code of Conduct of the subcommittee of the UE in respect to our blacklisting, to consider whether the time has not come for us to just say, to have a company, one member is sufficient to incorporate. England has now done it, and other jurisdictions have done it, instead of having, because, I think going forward with all of this, these possible exposure to being, their name being sullied, no doubt will cause people to shrink from wanting to provide the services that they've been accustomed to providing. And perhaps we need to be thinking of that. Mr. Speaker, I go further in respect to this report, more damning. It's their characterization of a purported text exchange between myself, I use the word purported, Mr. Speaker, purported text exchange between myself and the Deputy General Manager deal, and is held under the rubric suspicious, unusual communications. Speaker, and this is at page 17 of the report. And it speaks to, it has these messages to Davis Philip Brave, sent, apologies, I missed your call, I called back, but the phone is going to voicemail only. And then from Philip Brave Davis, not a prob, told Welly, 3,500 please, have payment processed Thursday, many thanks. And then to Davis, from DGM deal, the check should be available today. However, we will not be able to cash it, cash this cage, as it is a company check. Now, Speaker, I know me. I know me. When I read this, I became concerned. But I know this is not the way I conduct myself in matters of this kind. I just know me. All right? And so, you see, Mr. Speaker? You see? So, Mr. Speaker, so I had to look at it. And you know, because, like I say, I don't conduct myself like this. I may inquire about matters. I may make recommendations on matters. I may do so. You know, directions may come from me, but they would ordinarily fall on matters of policy. That's what I would do. So this exchange troubled me. And so I contacted Mr. Deal to have the context in which these exchanges were made. Right? His response, because he was saying, yes, Mr. Davis, this is the text I got from you, and yes, this is, I say, but this ain't me. He said, well, you know, when I think about it, you really don't do these things, right? No, this is what happened. So I said, so I said to him, he said, my view is, I said, you know, I'm sure, I don't believe this. So I asked him to provide me the phone number that was involved in this exchange. I asked him. He called me back, and he provided me with the number. And the number is 376. I give it to all of you so you could hear what the number was. 376001. Right? 0001. Right, that's the number he gave me. I don't know. I don't know whose number this is, Mr. Speaker. I never knew this number. You didn't call the number? Right? I don't know this number. What do I call it for? Right? I don't know the number. Right? Mr. Speaker, so the question is, did EY discover this number? Did they seek to determine whom this number was assigned to, or who is the owner of this account? Clearly, Mr. Speaker, someone must have been impersonating me who was engaging the text exchange. Right, Mr. Speaker? You see what I'm saying? Mr. Speaker? And so, Mr. Speaker, EY got his phone, and from his phone, they abstracted these text messages. And I asked him about it. I know this is not me. I know that. Right? Right. Well, I hope to. I hope to. I hope to. So, Mr. Speaker, would this not have been uncovered had they truly engaged in a proper forensic audit? Members opposite, Mr. Speaker, continue to paint this picture of corruption on the part of the PLP and their associates. You know, I go on record, you know, and I've done it all. I condemn corruption. Like I say, I know me. I know what I know myself. It has no place in our world. Right? As for the F&M, Their style of governance is to name and shame, as if that is what they were elected to do. Right? This is a continuing narrative of the members opposite, the FNM. See, the two PLP governments of 2002, 2007, 2012 to 2017 came into office knowing full well, but didn't move to prove, that there were instances of corruption on the part of the FNM. In fact, there are members sitting opposite now who have conflicted themselves and raised alarming issues of whether what they did was corrupt or not while holding posts in government. For example, Mr. Speaker, when you talk about conflict of interest, Article 49 of our Constitution requires that if any of us as a member of this body enters into an arrangement with another government agency, we are required to get an exemption from this House. Members of this House have gotten arrangements with the government, but never got an exemption. There's no record in this House of any exemption for them to enter into it. And those are some of the things we could talk about, but we move on. But if you continually raise matters, I'll bring it back and ask if you want them to examine these things. Let the anti-corruption unit look into these things as well.
They will.
Put it with them.
They will.
Right? See, Speaker, at the same time, right, in other places, you have serious allegations. I recall 2002, right? 2007, reports of incidents where members of the government was engaged in conduct that were deemed, that raised the question specter of corruption. But there was an investigation. Right? The Public Accounts Committee in 2007, 2007 was, right? They 2002, not 2001, made a report. Right? One of the members who was named in that report is in the cabinet today. Right? But again, why should we be naming and shaming? The time for you is to govern. If you continue to do it, we will continue. I will then start to do what you do. I don't want to do that. See, all I wish to say is that we are bigger than that. We're bigger than you think. We are a national party that has tirelessly sought to advance the welfare of the people. And we'll continue to do that and be that kind of party. Pettiness will not deliver food on the table. It will not provide the culture of oneness and dignity that we seek to strive for as a people. So let's get off it, man, and go about the task of governance. Right? That's all? All right. I had something else to say, but they have 4 more minutes. All right. We'll have more time to speak, I think. So, no, I'm not going to take advantage of that. No, I won't do that. You're my ginger ale buddy. Mr. Speaker. Ginger ale. Mr. Speaker, our solemn pledge, us on this side, to the Bahamian people remains unchanged. We will continue to be a voice for the poor, weak, the underprivileged, and the ordinary Bahamians, seeking a better way of life to replace the tyranny and culture of mean-spiritedness under this uncaring, spiteful, and vindictive FNM government. What we have in the Bahamas today, Mr. Speaker, and this is another point I make here, because when you look at the the EY report, and then when you hear some of the outbursts by members about what a minister may do or may not recommend, you see, first of all, you know, democracy is threatened when you tend to erode the concept of what is representative government. What we have in the Bahamas today, right, is a representative government. We are a representative government. We represent people. Underpinning all democratic societies is the principle of representative government, with a basic compact that assumes that public officials will hear from constituents, the general public, and to act appropriately upon their concerns. So if someone comes to you, Prime Minister, and says, listen, I need a job, would it be wrong for you to send them to water and sewage and say, see what you could do for that person? See what you could do for that person? If we can't do that, then democracy is threatened. We no longer representative government. You will always, each of you, all your MPs, people coming to you and asking you, do this for me. And you can say, well, I can't do that. You pick up the phone or you make a recommendation. When you recommend, you don't direct, you recommend, and the person could, whoever you send them to, will do what they could do or not do. But that's the concept of representative government, right? And you know, there's even, you know, there's a lot of judicial thinking on the subject as well, particularly where charges of corruption have been laid, because it becomes a thin line at times between what you can do and not do. But you recommend your representative. If you recommend, see, they are recommending people to be hired now because people coming to you, so that's corrupt, because the person who he's recommending voted for him. So we have to be careful how we are pushing this button, right? And the EY report suggests that. And so we cannot be complicit in the endorsement of this casting this pall over what I call representative government, because it potentially challenges the relationship between MPs and their constituents and the general public, and it will put the democracy at stake. It is for all of us to remove the scales from our eyes and see things as they really are. I just say that nothing y'all do will deter us from our mission of advocacy, constructive engagement, and wiping every tear from every eye. Nothing, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, let me just say, Cat Island, Rum Cay, and San Salvador, we are disappointed in this government's mid-year effort because we expected them to have done better, recognizing that they boast about their fiscal prudence, their competent management, and yet still, without any, yet still, without the acts of God that afflicted the Bahamas in the first half of 2016, 2017, with a consequential inactivity in revenue, the spike in expenditure as a result, the comparison to 2017 half year is dismal. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the honourable member for Long Island.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
You on a point of clarification?
Yes, ma'am.
With respect to your speech?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Sorry. Yes, sir. Respecting my speech. Mr. Speaker, all of the exhibits. I'm also going to touch on the tabled report. And all of the exhibits reference to Gladstone Road wastewater treatment plant, and many of them, the Honorable Member for Cat Island was copied therein, even with respect to the payments to NID. Payments of NID, Nassau Island Development. You got it. 22nd of April 2016, various emails to the financial secretary, etc. The member for Cat Island was copied. Okay, and there's no response, Mr. Speaker. An email from the member for Cat Island to substantiate what he is saying with respect to his concerns and what he expressed. We see what the permanent secretary says, but we see nothing from him, though he is copied in various emails. In various emails, Mr. Speaker. In fact, even in the board resolution, there's reference to the wishes of the permanent secretary, but nothing specifically to the member for Cat Island.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for North Eleuthera.
The member from Cat Island
Is this a point of clarification as well on your speech?
No, in reference to a question that he asked.
Oh, yes.
Yes. You know, Mr. Speaker, yes, I can answer questions. The member that the question that he asked about was the property or the sandpit area where the water came across the highway and cut across the road. And he wants to know the ownership of that property.
Honorable Member.
Okay. Let me rephrase it then. Let me rephrase it. Well, the reason the question was asked in reference to that sand pit is that I own that property. And the reason I purchased that property in 2012, when I used to get my sand from the sand pit in Hatchet Bay, I had an order for 20 loads of sand, Mr. Speaker. And immediately after the government change in 2012, I was refused to be able to purchase sand, even though I had 20 loads of sand ordered.
Honorable Member.
I'll get right to it. I'll get right to it, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, please.
The fact of the matter is, that area that is known as the sand pit, it is a community area where the community of Gregory Town have been collecting sand from that for decades. Anyone out of the area knows that they've been collecting sand out of that for decades. The community still collects sand from there. That had nothing to do with the road washing across. If the member for Cat Island...
the member for Cat Island has a point of order.
I did ask a question of the member for North Eleuthera, but he's not answering the question I asked. He's good. I just ask him again. If he answers that, fine. I don't need to spiel about 2002. Well, the question I asked: can the member of Parliament for North Eleuthera assist this Parliament in providing the name of the owner?
Honorable member for North Eleuthera. No, he was standing. Oh, I just want to make certain that you have the floor.
Okay, so do I repeat the question?
Continue.
The question I asked is, can the member of Parliament for North Eleuthera assist this Parliament in providing the name of the owner of the dredge or owner of the sandpit dredging operation? That's all I asked. If he could help us, then help us. If he can't, fine.
Mr. Speaker,
That's the question.
dredging operation. I know there's a community, there's an area that was there for decades that was being used by the community to collect sand. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
But now you know.
Thank you, honorable members. Honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpkins, and Salvador. Do you still wish to table
Yeah,
that,
Mr. Speaker, I have to lay
the letter?
the letter.
You want to still?
Pardon me, sir?
Do you want to?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
This is the letter, Mr. Speaker, dated the 4th of March to Mark Weinberg that I promised to lay over, and I do so now.
Order that the document be brought up.
Thank you.
Order that the document will lie on the table. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Mr. Speaker, as a newcomer in this place, I'm always attentive to when my seniors take the floor. I see it as an opportunity for me to learn something. And so when the honorable member for Cat Island mentioned that members on this side, members of the government, have disdain for Cat Island, just like the young member for Long Island, I rushed to my office, borrowed a dictionary, so I could have a good understanding of what this disdain is. And Oxford said, the feeling of disrespect or unworthiness towards something or someone. And I'm sure that the honorable member, with all of his flurry of words, being the good litigator that he is, I'm sure that that isn't the word that he wanted to use.
Okay, I wonder why.
And that's why I'm going to give, otherwise I'm going to say some things, but I'm sure that
Yeah,
they...
okay, okay. Thank you. And I thank you for referring to the
The chair
definition.
recognizes the honorable member for Cat
Mr.
Island.
Speaker, if he followed the theme of what I was saying, I was emphasizing that there's no priority as to citizenship as a result of where they live. And I say that in this context, that the member from Elizabeth has said on a number of occasions, and he went on again to say, that what we were doing in Cat Island to build those clinics, he said that Cat Island was not worthy to have it.
I'm satisfied that he's not going to withdraw. So I continue.
Wait, they're saying that we're not worthy.
I'm satisfied that you aren't going to withdraw. So I continue. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member sought to suggest that this side, the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, has disdain for Cat Island. But you know, Mr. Speaker, and he still, the honorable member still sits here and says, build his clinics. But. Okay. Hey, you see what all I'm putting away as a result of your withdrawal? Mr. Speaker, I was about to talk about representing Cat Island all of these years and still now having to ask for clinic. That's disdain. But I do withdraw that. I too withdraw that. No. The honorable thing to do when an honorable member withdraws is to withdraw. So I withdraw. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased, privileged, and humbled at the same time for the opportunity to stand here and represent the good, decent people of Southern Shores for whom I will never, ever have any disdain. I find them worthy. I respect them. And I will always do that as long as I have a breath. Mr. Speaker, the good people of Southern Shores have afforded me an opportunity that many sought during the last election season. I think there were some 189 candidates, and God has so blessed me through them to be able to stand here. And for that, I will be ever so grateful. I want to reassure the good people of Southern Shores of my commitment to speak for and on their behalf, and to speak to them whenever I have messages from this place, to speak to them whenever there are matters of concern or mutual interest, to speak to them whenever there is a need to seek their voice and their views to bring to this place. Mr. Speaker, if you would permit me, Southern Shores has suffered a number of deaths, and I would like the opportunity to express my sympathy here publicly, while I would have spoken to many of them personally. To the family of the late Stephen Ford of Ford Close. Mr. Speaker, last Friday, I had a beautiful conversation with a lady by the name of Cypriana Fox. And the conversation was about the funeral of her son, Andrew, that was intended to be the following day. And we had a beautiful conversation for about 15, 20 minutes. And I got up the following morning, Saturday past, got dressed, looking forward to furthering that conversation with Miss Fox at Holy Family Church on Robinson Road, only to find on my arrival at her son's funeral that she passed that very same evening. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask the entire community of Southern Shores, but more especially the ones on Margaret Street where she lived, to pray for her remaining loved ones, her son, Sean, her daughters, her grandchildren. That is a heavy blow for them to suffer all at once. And I pray that the good Lord will strengthen them as they continue on. Mr. Speaker, Southern Shores, Team Campbell is alive and well. We've moved from number 318 Carmichael Road to number 16 Bahama Boulevard in the heart of Flamingo Garden, just on the boundary of Carmichael, my good neighbor. And I moved there, Carmichael, Mr. Speaker, through you to Carmichael, to be closer to you, but to ensure that you keep your promise that when we start this softball league,
We'll beat you.
not that you'll beat me, but at least you'll show up. Mr. Speaker, and so I want to say to the constituents that there's been a period of transition, moving from one building to the next, setting up office, but we are up and running. The phone number to the office is the same, 601-0004. Mr. Speaker, we're planning a number of events for and on behalf of the community. Most immediate amongst them, tomorrow evening, we will be having our third town hall meeting, quarterly town hall meetings. And the topic is educational opportunities. We will have persons from the Ministry of Education, Scholarship Department, UB, to speak about opportunities relative to scholarships and higher education. Tomorrow evening, the 15th of March, Thursday the 15th of March, at Anatole Rogers School at 7 p.m. Mr. Speaker, we will be having a fun run walk and health well-being awareness on the 28th of April. We will be having the second annual festival. You know, as a thank you for the confidence they reposed in me, last June, we had a concert in Millis Heights Park, all local artists. That has become an annual event. This year, it takes on a name, Mr. Speaker. We will be hosting Father Rama, a weekend of activities that will culminate with a church service on the 11th of June, where we will honor ordinary fathers in that southwestern area. And we will advertise properly to make sure that all of our neighbors, Carmichael, Golden Isles, all of our neighbors, Tall Pines, are able to come and celebrate with us. Turning to the mid-year budget, Mr. Speaker. The period July to December 2017 has been one of considerable preparatory activity for my ministry. The recomposition of the former Ministry of Transport to include local government as opposed to aviation has certainly ensured that the Ministry of Transport and local government will touch the lives of all persons residing throughout the length and breadth of this Commonwealth of Islands. It is certainly the case that the services provided by the Department of Local Government, the Post Office, the Department of Meteorology, the Port Department, and the Road Traffic Department are critical to the lives of Bahamians and residents. And I found upon assuming office in May of 2017 that these departments had undertaken major projects, were about to engage in such projects, or were challenged under the remit of the new Free National Movement government to assume added responsibilities or to move towards modernization necessary for transforming the lives of our people. I discovered that the postal sector was in the midst of perhaps the most traumatic period in its history, but that the opportunities for modernization and economic enhancement at that sector had never been greater. I found that the Road Traffic Department had commenced the automation of its licensing and registration services. The Department of Meteorology was procuring additional Doppler radar and automatic weather systems to ensure its coverage of the entire Bahamas. And that the Port Department was poised to contract for the private provisions of state-of-the-art tugboats in a bid to deal with its aged, inadequate fleet. This same Port Department is now challenged by our new government to proceed full steam into a process of modernization by developing a public-private partnership for the provision of its services at Prince George Wharf. And if I might pause here, Mr. Speaker, I hastened to withdraw what may have been contentious after the honorable member for Cat Island withdrew. And I want to make it clear that I have no quarrels with the former member of transport, the good member for Angliston. And that is why, up front in my presentation, I hasten to acknowledge what was in place, what was about to happen, because I don't want it to be a matter of convenience. When it's convenient for some, governments are continuous, and when it's not, they're not. I have no quarrels with what was in place, and I'm privileged for the opportunity to build upon.
He's a big man.
It is. Mr. Speaker, it's perhaps the Department of Local Government which will see the greatest transformation, as it has been mandated by our new government to deepen the democracy in our nation by introducing local government to New Providence when the next local government elections are held in 2020. Mr. Speaker, upon assuming the leadership mantle in the Ministry of Transport and Local Government, I was confronted in my first week in office with the substandard conditions which existed at the General Post Office building during a tour of that facility. I found that the staff had been working on reduced hours for the previous 5 years due to the deteriorated condition in the building, and that this situation had recently worsened even further as the air conditioning system had completely failed, resulting in staff working each day up to 11 a.m. In an effort to address this situation, mail sorters at the General Post Office, along with their sorting frames, were outsourced to the district offices on New Providence. While some successes were achieved, this effort did not produce the desired results, as the post office was then faced with an inadequate supply of vehicles to accommodate the additional amount of mail runs required between the 8 New Providence district offices. Despite this, the resilience of the post office staff is deserving of much praise, as they have been working tirelessly to bring this serious backlog in mail under control. Consequently, mail that was backlogged some 3 to 4 months is steadily decreasing and is expected to be current within the next 4 or 5 weeks or thereabout. This, of course, is contingent upon there being no additional adverse occurrences which would result in serious disruption in operations. Mr. Speaker, I hasten to make the point that the Ministry of Transport and Local Government is the client entity in this matter. While the post office is responsible for providing a service, we rely on the Ministry of Works and Urban Development to address the repairs needed to this critical building, a building which is at the heartbeat for the operation of the entire postal sector. And I stick a pin. I hear my predecessor saying, yes, make that clear. Let me make one thing clear. Unlike my predecessor, my Minister of Works and Urban Development is on my side. My Minister of Works and Urban Development is lending me a helping hand.
It's accommodations also.
Oh, okay.
Finding alternative location, that's the problem.
We can get to that. You say to me, fix it.
Fix it.
Fix it. In this regard, while the Ministry of Works has been vigilant in its efforts to assist us, that ministry is unfortunately confronted with an almost 50-year-old building, which, in true government fashion, has had minimum maintenance and which is now plagued with failing AC, plumbing, and electrical systems requiring constant attention. However, while I remain concerned about this situation and its impact on staff and the provision of services, I am somewhat pleased to report that the AC system has been restored, albeit with some remaining challenges and staff no longer working 3-hour days, leaving at 11 a.m. each day, as was the case when I assumed office. Operations now terminate at 2 p.m. Angliston, and efforts are continuing by the Ministry of Works to address the almost daily failings in the General Post Office building. In this regard, the ministry expended approximately $85,000 in the external contracts over the period July to December 2017 for AC repairs, air quality improvements, general cleaning, and mold remediation at the General Post Office. This does not include internal funding expended by the Ministry of Works for ongoing electrical and plumbing repairs at that building. Additionally, the Department of Environmental Health also undertook several vector control exercises at the General Post Office during this 6-month period. I'm also pleased to report, Mr. Speaker, that efforts are underway to have the General Post Office relocated from its current location to another site. And the decision has been made by this government to implode the building at East Hill Street. As a consequence of the conditions in this building and the reduced working hours, the post office has predictably not had an increase in its revenue intake for the 6-month period ending December 2017, as the General Post Office houses the largest volume of transactions on any given day. The post office has also not been able to expand its services as anticipated by finalizing public-private partnerships with various entities. Revenue intake for the period July 2017 to December 2017 was just under $700,000. This is down by $177,000 from the previous year's intake of $836,000. Indeed, it is fitting to note that the post office's revenue has seen a steady decline for the past 5 years due to reduced working hours and the building issues. The post office's budget allocation for 2017-2018 budgetary period was $7.39 million. And the expenditure to date has been $3.9 million. It is anticipated that there will be no difficulty in the post office meeting its financial commitments up to June 30th, 2018. Mr. Speaker, in addition to conditions at the General Post Office building, the post office was also confronted during the midterm budgetary period by an ongoing severe shortage of staff. And Mr. Speaker, let me put in another plug for my predecessor. You would have heard other speakers talk about overstaffing in their various departments. Let me say here that that is not the case that I met in the General Post Office. In this regard, the Post Office completed a comprehensive assessment of its staffing needs, and this underscored a serious depletion in the entire organizational structure. In this respect, the postal sector has seen a reduction in staff of severe proportions, from in excess of 300 persons to 204 staff members due to retirements, resignations, and deaths. This dearth of staffing throughout New Providence and the Family Islands continue to negatively impact the ability of the department to function at the required level as expected by the Bahamian public. Submissions have been made to the Ministry of Finance in the new budget for the new staffing required to perform current services adequately and to allow for the addition of new services, thereby improving substantially the post office's revenue. Closely aligned, Mr. Speaker, to the work of the post office is the government's critical mail boat system, under which the government mail bag is dispatched via the post office to Family Island communities by contracted mailboat operators. It is noted, Mr. Speaker, that the flooding and ongoing AC issues at the post office resulted in complete closure of the post office for 1 week during October 2017, during which time Family Island communities were unable to receive this essential item. I'm pleased that conditions improved enough to allow for the system to be restored immediately thereafter. Mr. Speaker, there are currently 22 mailboat routes, which are serviced by 19 mailboat operators, all of whom receive a government subvention to undertake this service. Funds paid out to these operators during the period July to December 2017 total $2,188,500. This system is the source of constant commentary by the Bahamian public, much of which speaks to improvements required in the system, specifically in the area of customer satisfaction. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I wish to emphasize that it is absolutely necessary that Family Islanders receive their goods in accordance with established schedules and that the goods are in an acceptable condition when they arrive at the Family Island destinations. I wish to state unequivocally at this time that business as usual cannot continue in this essential sector. And there is a need for the government to make some interventions to improve the system. I also acknowledge the fact that there is a need for attention to be given to existing mailboat contracts, all of which would have been in place from the period 07 to 08. Of greater importance, Mr. Speaker, is the need to ensure that mailboats, ferry boats, and indeed all large vessels involved in commercial activities are safe for the carriage of passengers and cargo. In this regard, I'm pleased to advise that the Port Department and the Bahamas Maritime Authority will proceed with plans initially enunciated under the former government for the establishment of a joint port BMA inspection regime, under which arrangement both entities will certify that all such vessels meet basic standards in accordance with the Caribbean codes. I'm pleased to advise that the standards to be effected have been agreed by both entities, and discussions will shortly commence with stakeholders to advise them of the timelines proposed for necessary improvements required to these vessels. Mr. Speaker, I turn now to the Road Traffic Department. I'm pleased to note that the period during the 6-month budgetary period ending December 2017, the Road Traffic Department completed the first phase of its automation process, which ended in October 2017. This automation provided for the introduction of a state-of-the-art traffic management system for new driver's licenses and vehicle licensing system. As of December 2017, the island of New Providence, Grand Bahama, Abaco, and Eleuthera were almost fully automated and online, with the islands of Exuma following shortly thereafter in early 2018. The second phase also commenced during the midterm budgetary period and will conclude in 2018 with the rollout of the new systems to the remaining islands of Andros, the Berry Islands, Long Island, Acklins, Crooked Island, Maguana, Inagua, Cat Island, and San Salvador. Andros. I see Andros as one. Andros.
Yes.
I wish to make it clear, Mr. Speaker, that the rollout of the new system in these islands will depend upon the necessary connectivity being put in place by BTC. Now that the major islands have been automated, the Road Traffic Department has been able to assess the impact of the new system, and I'm pleased to report that they are, for the most part, operating as expected. During the initial launch of the automation, several stations were required. I could pay a little extra for some water, please. Oh, I got it. All right. Good man. Thank you. During the initial launch of the automation, several stations were required to engage additional staff. There was therefore an increase in personnel emoluments in the Road Traffic Department's budget due to the transfer, Angleston, this is what you want to hear, due to the transfer of 36 contractual workers from the Ministry of Finance. Additionally, funds were also allocated for lump sum incremental payments. Funding was also allocated in the amount of $2,129,574.06 for the entire personnel emoluments required for the automation budget for the Road Traffic Department through to June 2018. In addition to personnel emoluments, travel has been a major component of the automation process due to the need for pre- and post-training and development of staff. The provision of funding and lodging, the provision of funding for lodging and transportation were also included in the 2017-2018 budget, and $10,219.50 was expended for these expenses by the Road Traffic Department up to December 2017. This travel was essential for ensuring that the necessary standards were maintained for smooth and efficient operations. Mr. Speaker, the introduction of the transportation management system also required a substantive allocation for the purchase of assets, which required increase as approved by the Tenders Board. The damages sustained to the Clarence Bean building following Hurricane Matthew necessitated road traffic's move to the Thomas A. Robinson Stadium. This move has not come without challenge, as there was insufficient storage space in the stadium for furniture, assets, and other supplies and equipment. Space was therefore leased on University Boulevard, a cost of which was borne by the Ministry of Public Services. Thank you, Garden Hills. However, the Department of Road Traffic will be required to provide funding for the contracting of security services for the rented space in the new budgetary period. Mr. Speaker, the issue of which I am most passionate at this time is undoubtedly road safety. And as a 29-year veteran of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, I'm fully aware of the impact that road traffic accidents have on this nation. Road safety is a critical issue that knows no demographic or geographic boundaries, as it impacts nations at all economic levels. According to the World Health Organization, a road traffic accident occurs each second on roads throughout the world, and every 30 seconds, a child is killed in a traffic accident somewhere in the world. In an effort to address these disturbing statistics, the Bahamas signed on to the Decade of Action for Road Safety in May 2011. This United Nations initiative aims to reduce road deaths and injuries across the world and to save 5 million lives by 2020. Unfortunately, our statistics have not improved. We are still averaging approximately 50 fatalities per year, and many persons have also been seriously injured. And Mr. Speaker, while we mourn with the families of those persons who lose their lives on the road, we hear very little about the plight of the families of victims who are suffering lifelong injuries, persons who have to be fed and clothed and bathed because they can't do anything for themselves. This is a lifelong impact on those families. According to statistics from the Police Traffic Division, we had 51 fatalities last year. Disturbingly, over 1,000 accidents have occurred thus far this year, which include 16 fatalities. As we are only in the 3rd month of the year, we are likely to exceed the 51 fatalities which occurred last year. Disturbingly, the number of fatalities which have occurred thus far for 2018 are on pace with the amount of homicides that have been committed. That is a strange phenomenon. We at the Ministry of Transport and Local Government and the Royal Bahamas Police Force are particularly concerned about the number of pedestrians being killed and the alarming rise in hit-and-run accidents. We must reverse this trend, which threatens to reach epidemic proportions. Mr. Speaker, if we were to use the gross domestic product per capita for the Bahamas, the cost of a fatal accident may be in the range of $1 million when one considers the loss of lifetime income by persons who lose their lives, the devastating impact on surviving family members, the cost of emergency services, and the costs associated with prosecuting persons in the court system following a serious accident or fatality. As the lead agency for road safety in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, my ministry will continue to work in partnership with members of our Road Safety Committee, including the Road Traffic Department, the police, the Ministries of Public Works, Health and Education, and the corporate Bahamas, including the Insurance Association, the Motorcycle Association, Educarting, Commonwealth Brewery, the Sign Man, and other private sector entities who have indicated their commitment to assist in addressing this critical issue. Together, we are all focusing on the 4 E's of a successful road safety campaign. These include education, enforcement, engineering, and emergency services. During the 6-month period in question, my ministry engaged in various road safety sensitization measures, including the launch of the Junior Road Safety Program in several primary schools at a cost of several $100s for the printing of materials. We realize that this is extremely essential that we reach the young of our nation who will become the drivers and road users of tomorrow. In this regard, this program empowers 2 students from grade 4 and 5 in primary schools to deliver road safety messages to students and parents through the use of notice boards, competitions, and assemblies. Very shortly, this program will be introduced in all government primary schools and will eventually extend to all government schools throughout the country. Mr. Speaker, during the midterm budgetary period, we've called on private sector partners to assist us in financing the erection of billboards, have distributed numerous flyers and leaflets to sensitize the public of the importance of engaging in good road safety habits, and have relied on social media to assist us in getting our messages out to the public, particularly to young adults. Targeting road user behavior through education, legislation, and enforcement have become the cornerstone of our efforts for improving road safety in New Providence and throughout our Family Islands, where road safety committees are now being established or reactivated. We have set aside some $6,000 to continue our road safety efforts during the remainder of the current budgetary period. Of great importance, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that during the period July to December 2017, a first draft of the amendments to the Road Traffic Act was produced by the Law Reform Commission of the Office of the Attorney General, which is now being further refined, and very shortly, public and private sector stakeholders will be called upon to provide their comments on critical issues which they wish to see addressed in the new legislation. In addition to other critical road traffic issues, these amendments to the Road Traffic Act will target issues of speeding and other traffic infractions, mobile phone use while driving, driving drunk, and other forms of distracted driving. We also propose to substantially increase the penalties for irresponsible acts while driving, and to provide for imprisonment where necessary, where fatalities or serious injuries occur. Mr. Speaker, I therefore wish to call on all road users, including drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians, to examine their own behavior on the streets and to ensure that we all engage in responsible behavior. Road accidents are preventable. The loss of life and serious accidents which are occurring on our streets and which are resulting in death and ruined lives are completely unacceptable in a civilized society. Mr. Speaker, the commitment to road safety also requires that the Road Traffic Department examine where it might be able to improve its inner workings in order to foster a safer environment for all road users. In this regard, it is noted that properly functioning vehicles are an essential element in minimizing accidents on our streets. It is also noted that the level of inspection done by the staff of the Road Traffic Department are minimal in nature. And this is not a criticism, but we've all been there. Turn on your lights, blow your horn, turn on your wipers, put on your signals, and you're good to go. It has been suggested that the nature of the inspection being done by the Road Traffic Department should be more comprehensive, Mr. Speaker. As the Road Traffic Department has already embarked on a process of modernization, it has been determined that during the 6-month budgetary period now under discussion, that the Road Traffic Department ought to continue these efforts and should therefore explore the outsourcing of its vehicle inspection process. Therefore, during the new budgetary period, it is anticipated that the department will commence the first phase of this process by engaging automobile dealers of new vehicles in the inspection process, and thereafter will engage smaller entrepreneurs to also participate in the outsourcing of this vehicle inspection. Mr. Speaker, no discussion of road safety would be complete without reference being made to our public service drivers, who are relied upon to transport both residents and visitors alike safely to their destinations. It is certainly the case that there are challenges in this area and that there is a need to restore a sense of discipline to the sector. In this regard, I am pleased to report that my ministry, in collaboration with the Office of the Attorney General, is in the process of finalizing subsidiary legislation which will require public service drivers to be attired in uniforms, thereby ensuring that they are easily identified and that they project a professional image for residents and visitors alike. The new uniforms will provide for 2 different native island print shirts for summer and winter wear, along with navy or black trousers or skirts, and will be comfortable, allowing for easy mobility. Mr. Speaker, the regulations giving effect to the introduction of the new uniforms are generally complete and are now being tweaked for their introduction in the month of April. It is important to note that tour and limousine operators will be exempt from a specified uniform requirement, as their operators are already required to be attired in the uniform of the company that they represent, while limousine operators are also already suitably attired due to the nature of their clientele. However, both groups will be required to advise the controller of the Road Traffic Department as to the attire which they, as a group, adopted as being appropriate wear. Mr. Speaker, another area of concern for my ministry as it relates to public service drivers is the issue of leasing of government licenses and franchises for taxis, tour buses, limousines, omnibuses, by persons who are not engaged in the public transportation sector and who have no interest in being involved in the sector. Some of them have leased their licenses or franchises to third parties who require them in order to operate. This is a vexing problem which has resulted in often astronomical fees being paid by persons who are leasing from franchisees and license holders, and who often find themselves caught in a vicious cycle and at the mercy of the unscrupulous individuals who often have no compunction about charging exorbitant fees for the continued use of the licenses or franchises. Mr. Speaker, this is a form, in my humble opinion, of modern-day slavery. I wish to emphasize, Mr. Speaker, that this government attends to address this issue head-on. And during the period July to December 2017 and up to the current period, the Road Traffic Department and the Ministry of Transport and Local Government have been compiling records necessary for addressing this issue in a comprehensive fashion, and will shortly seek the advice of the Cabinet with respect to right-sizing of the public transport sector. These efforts are designed to establish an equitable, fair system for all Bahamians who have demonstrated a commitment to participate properly in the sector. And Mr. Speaker, I emphasize all Bahamians because I found thus far that there are some hotels or hoteliers, there are some other foreign entities that have found their way to become involved in the local transportation system. Let me make it clear here and now, and I'm sure I have the concurrence of my predecessor, that this is reserved for Bahamians and franchise, but Bahamians Bahamians to be franchise holders. Thank you very much.
Serve for Bahamians.
Mr. Speaker, in addition to the leasing of plates, one of the other most vexing problems confronting the public service system is the behavior of some of our omnibus or jitney drivers. Behavior which is often dangerous and which diminishes the quality of the experience of the persons who choose or who are obliged to take public buses, and which has led to a disordered, unsafe environment for all road users. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to get some phone calls from drivers and operators who do not fall in this category. Let me say here and now, if you do not fall in this category, I'm not speaking to you. There's no need for you to call me. Who the cap fit, let them wear it. If the cap fits you, take the cap off. Stop driving in that manner. Stop making it necessary for us to have this kind of discussion. Many persons have expressed concerns about the reckless behavior exhibited by some omnibus or jitney operators. In this regard, there have been any number of accidents and improper activities involving jitney operators, and both the Road Traffic Department and the police are challenged in their capacity to regulate the driving habits of many of these drivers. Mr. Speaker, I want to confess here that on 3 or 4 separate occasions, I forgot that I was a minister. 40 Campbell kicked in, and I said, Thurston, pull this car over. And I confronted bus drivers, asking them, why is this behavior necessary? Mr. Speaker, while the development of a unified bus system has for some time been touted as the means of reforming the current busing system, bringing all stakeholders to the table to adopt an agreed way forward has been a challenge for a number of years, particularly as bus operators and owners are generally of the view that any change in the status quo will automatically greatly disadvantage them. I'm pleased to report, Mr. Speaker, that following much negotiation and consultations, the Ministry of Transport and Local Government is poised to enter into an agreement with the Public Transport Representatives Group, PTR, for the provisions, the same one, for the provisions of the bus service on a single revised route for a period of 6 months. This pilot project, initiated by my predecessor, is supported by the Inter-American Development Bank, which has secured a $500,000 grant from the Italian government for the development of the project. Mr. Speaker, $350,000 of this funding was set aside for the engagement of a consulting transportation specialist, and a Canadian company was retained and provided services for the development of the pilot, much of which were delivered during the 6-month budgetary period now under review, allowing for the expenditure of the greater portion of this funding during the midterm budgetary period. This represented component 1 of the project, and component 2, which provides for the general administration and supervision of the pilot program, is due to commence shortly, as soon as the PTR and the Ministry of Transport and Local Government have finalized the agreement and a related memorandum of understanding for the running of the pilot program by the group. It is intended that the implementation of the pilot will identify all issues which require correction before the unified system can even be considered for introduction on the island basis throughout New Providence. There will be also a review of bus routes to ensure that all areas through New Providence are properly serviced. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to matters pertaining to the Department of Local Government. As we have heard time and time again, local government is about bringing democracy closer to the people. It is about giving people a sense of ownership by making decisions that affect the citizenry at the local level. Fiscal responsibility, accountability, and transparency are critical if we are to improve the manner in which government services are delivered to Family Island communities. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Local Government, with its headquarters here in New Providence, has a presence on every inhabited island and key in the Bahamas. It is mandated to assist the government in looking after the well-being and economic growth and development of the Family Islands. With that said, Mr. Speaker, for the fiscal year 2017-2018, the Department of Local Government was given a budget of $23,638,760 for its operations. Of this amount, Mr. Speaker, the largest portion, $13,503,130, was allocated to Family Island districts, Exuma. I should also advise that 12% of this amount is on retention with the Ministry of Finance. Therefore, 88% was actually allocated to the end of January. 66% had already been, to the end of January, 66% had already been released to the various islands, to the various Family Island districts. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Local Government has had a productive and eventful mid-year. As reflected in its budget, fiscal responsibility and transparency and accountability remains the watchword of the department, and for the Family Island administrators, local government councils, and town committees in the delivery of their services. Mr. Speaker, the personal emoluments spent for the period July to December 2017 was $78,452 less than the amount spent for the same period last year due to the retirement and expiration of contracts of some Family Island administrators. There were also 4 deaths and other clerical staff retirements within the department. In Block 10, travel and expenditure has increased due to the beginning of official travel by myself and senior officers to Family Islands, where we engage on a listening tour designed to ascertain the will of the local communities and staff members, to allow them to express their concerns and to advise them of various initiatives underway within the various departments within the Ministry of Transport and Local Government, and which would impact them in some way. During each visit, I was accompanied by my permanent secretary and representative heads of departments and other staff critical to the department's operations. And Mr. Speaker, I would have taken this opportunity to engage in frank discussions with the stakeholders and practitioners. And one of the things that I would have made clear to them is that the morning after having been appointed as the Minister of Local Government, I didn't find myself any smarter, any more knowledgeable about the process, and my curiosity for wanting to be an informed participant caused me to come to those who are actually practicing. And I found that with each visit, I've been leaving more informed, and I appreciate the participation and the sharing, and I appreciate that they appreciate that for the first time, the Minister of Local Government have come to sit with them. Thus far, the communities of East and West Grand Bahama, the city of Freeport have been visited. In addition, North, South, and Central Abaco, Hopetown, Cat Island, for whom we have no disdain, Mangrove Key, and Bimini. And this Friday, the team travels to the Berry Islands. I wish to ensure our Family Island administrators, counselors, and staff that the concerns highlighted during my visits are being addressed and to the extent that our resources will allow. What we would have done, Mr. Speaker, while visiting these districts, we would have had some general conversations, but we are aware that there are persons who have personal concerns, and we would not have subjected them to discussing them in an open forum, so we would have provided some sheets to allow them to enumerate their personal concerns, which would have been taken back to our HR section, and those matters are being addressed. I would have already seen some response from the HR, and I would mention some things later on in my presentation to show that their concerns are being addressed. In Block 20, the need to send bulk mail and goods by mailboat services to the district is essential to the continued work of administrators in the Family Islands, and there has been an increase in expenditure in this block. Block 30 has been slightly affected due to the fact that some administrators have retired or become domiciled, resulting in the discontinuation of rental allowance for those persons, reducing expenditure in this block. Block 50. The increase in this block is due to the department hosting its local government leadership training conference in September 2017. This conference is held every 3 years after the local government elections. Block 90. The department received new allocations in 2017-2018 for this block to carry out minor capital repairs throughout Exuma, to carry out minor capital repairs throughout the 33 local government districts. Mr. Speaker, in September of last year, the Department of Local Government hosted a very successful 3-day induction training program for newly elected local government officials and Family Island administrators. More than 100 persons participated in this conference, and I'm pleased to report that Family Island officials left the conference fully energized and inspired to conduct their affairs in an appropriate manner. During the conference, councillors drew attention to the need for more funding in their districts to carry out necessary projects. This is an area which will be examined more closely, as we note that many councils are expending a significant portion of their budgets on salaries and are finding it difficult to carry out other important responsibilities. This challenge has resulted in a policy being put in place directing councils not to engage any additional employment without reference to the director responsible for local government. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to advise that each local government district has been granted funds to assist with small-scale capital development projects in their respective districts, including Cat Island, Exuma, and Andros, for whom we have no disdain. To date, over $700,000 has been advanced to councils. And while that may seem insignificant to Exuma, who's used to counting big money, it is a whole lot more than they have been granted in this area for many, 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 many years. I hasten to add, Mr. Speaker, that this is the first time in many years, I just said that such capital allocation outside of their annual recurrent budget. This effort demonstrates my ministry's commitment to working with all councils, all. I don't need to list off the 3 that I did. Yeah. To allow them to undertake a little more than they anticipated. And it is hoped that councils will be provided with similar funding during the new budgetary period to continue with projects which they have started. One request is that these projects are touchy-feely projects, projects that we can see next month, next year, and the year after. Mr. Speaker, in the speech from the throne, it was announced that the government will form a committee to look into the possibility of introducing local government to New Providence. I'm pleased to report that the committee has been recently appointed by the government and is expected to be mobilized shortly. From all indications, it appears that New Providence is ready for some form of local government, and we await the committee's preliminary report in the next 6 months. Should it be determined that it is feasible for local government to be introduced in New Providence, a specific model will be recommended. Mr. Speaker, during 2017-2018 fiscal period, the Department of Local Government was also instrumental in processing the confirmation. Exuma? This is where I talk about having heard their cries and having reviewed their individual concerns. Listen, listen. The Department of Local Government has also been instrumental in processing the confirmation of 264 persons who were regularized from local government district councils throughout the Family Islands into the central government. 264 persons who will now be able to go to the bank and get a loan, who will now be able to get a job letter as a result of the Ministry of Transport and Local Government having heard their cries through these listening tours. These employees have served for 10 years or more without any benefits and can now look forward to full remuneration for their service and retirement benefits. Mr. Speaker, and you ask about the money, some $500,000+ was involved in making this happen. That's where the money gone. Mr. Speaker, other initiatives undertaken by the Department of Local Government during the 6-month period under review and the period immediately following include the engagement of 3 additional Family Island administrators, the regularization of 6 previously engaged Family Island administrators, and the expansion of the Junior Council to include 2 new councils in Mangrove Key, I think it's the Mangrove Key Bees, and in Bimini, the Bimini Marlins. Under the Junior Council program, high school students are afforded the opportunity to engage in governance and leadership at the local levels in their schools and communities. In the last 8 years, the program has been incrementally introduced into 19 local government districts and 23 schools, and has had an impact on thousands of young persons throughout our Family Islands. The success of this program is noted by the fact that several persons who were elected in the last local government elections were once junior councillors. Mr. Speaker, I turn my attention now to the Department of Meteorology, which provides meteorological and climatological services for aviation, mariners, and the general public, with the intent to assist in the safety and protection of lives, property, and other interests in the Bahamas. The department is also mandated to continually monitor and improve its products and services through a quality management system which adheres to defined regulations that meets the needs and requirements of stakeholders through a verification of its products. Mr. Speaker, the budget for the Department of Meteorology for 2017-2018 period is $2,832,100. I'm advised by the experts in the Department of Meteorology that the Earth's atmosphere is continually being modified by human impacts. And as the atmosphere is quite sensitive, even to slight changes in its constituents or components, the atmosphere must be constantly studied and monitored. Thus, in the dynamic fields of meteorology and climatology, training and retraining are essential as new theories and results from the latest research and more modern, precise meteorological equipment and instruments are developed. Meteorologists and forecasters must therefore be made aware of the latest research and weather measuring and monitoring tools available that would allow them to better understand and forecast the weather. Therefore, the Department of Meteorology must have its officers trained in the latest hurricane forecasting techniques, tropical meteorological theories, weather radar meteorology, and television weather presenting. With these matters for consideration, Mr. Speaker, the department's budgetary provisions for training and retraining in 2017-2018 is $60,000, and $30,000 was expended during the 6-month budgetary period ending December 2017. The department is poised to expend the remaining funds as soon as they are released during the final quarter of the period to cover tuition for in-service training awards for 2 female officers to continue their studies at the University of the West Indies, where they are enrolled pursuing degrees in meteorology. Also in January 2018, 2 officers commenced studies in the senior level Met Technician certification course, and 1 officer in pursuing the entry-level Met Technician certification course being held at the Caribbean Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology in Barbados. Mr. Speaker, the period ending December 2017 saw the Met Department forge on with its Doppler weather radar and airport weather observing system programs. In this regard, that started in October 2016 under my predecessor. The government of the Bahamas signed a $19,136,110 2-year contract with Vaisala to Vaisala OYJ, a Finnish company, Finnish meaning from Finland, a Finnish company, to install a network of Doppler weather radars and airport weather observation systems across the Bahamas. Network will consist of 4 Vaisala WRM-200 dual polarized C-band Doppler weather radars with ranges up to 250 miles, which are to be installed at Linden Pinling Airport. This one is done already. At Marsh Harbor, Abaco, which is near completion. I saw that one. At Deadman's Key, Long Island, and Maguana. And 9 state-of-the-art airport weather observation systems, OWAS, in Freeport, Grand Bahama, Treasure Key, Abaco, Marsh Harbor, Abaco, North Eleuthera, Governor's Harbor, Eleuthera, Stella Maris, Long Island, Georgetown, Exuma, and San Salvador. Mr. Speaker, the AWAS will all be installed on the respective islands by November 2018, I'm advised. And the initial training in Doppler weather radar operations and maintenance were provided to the staff of the Department of Meteorology in 2017, while training in the use, operation, and maintenance of the new AWAS system is presently taking place at the department's office on Blake Road. As the department prepares itself for complete installation of its state-of-the-art Doppler radar and AWOS systems, it remains conscious of the fact that its greatest asset is its staff. In this regard, efforts began in July 2017 to provide for the regularization and advancement of staff members, and it is hopeful that by the end of the current budgetary period in June of this year, the transfer and reclassification of 6 staff members will be completed, and that there will be 1 reinstatement, 2 re-engagements, 5 confirmations, and 19 promotions, all at a cost of $420,850, which was budgeted. Mr. Speaker, the Port Department has regulatory responsibility for all ports in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and has oversight responsibility for all government ports throughout the archipelago. It is also charged with ensuring the cleanup of the marine environment as a result of oil spills or other disasters at sea. The total revenue collected by the Port Department during the period July 1st to December 31st, 2017 was $3,144,983, an increase of $1 million over the same period for last year, due to an increase in collection of arrears and regular revenue collection from foreign yacht charters and fees assessed on commercial private docks, master's licenses, commercial and private boats, and peerage and harbor dues. And Mr. Speaker, if I might say, that is only a drop in the bucket of the revenue that remains uncollected out there. During the same period, the Port Department's expenditure totaled approximately $2,299,129.63 as a result of the normal operation recurrent expenditure of $1,518,969.20, which was spent for personal emoluments, subsistence travel allowance, rents, advertisement, maintenance fees, and other charges, operation of facility, and contracts development. Mr. Speaker, the Port Department has responsibility for the maintenance and operation of Prince George Wharf and Port-Ski, and funding spent for the 6-month budgetary period was $198,972 for the daily cleaning and landscaping, maintenance for the upkeep of these facilities. In addition to the cleaning of the Prince George Wharf and Port-Ski, this funding also covered general masonry and cosmetic maintenance of the eastern entrance and western exit of Port-Ski Dock and its parking lot. Mr. Speaker, the Port Department has continued to be plagued by the continuous repairs and supplies and parts replacement for the department's 2 tugboats, the Amberjack and the Snapper. For the first half of the fiscal year, approximately $185,090 was spent for the maintenance of these 2 tugboats. $185,090. Tugboat services in New Providence are essential to shipping, and as of April 2019, I hope I'm correct with that, as of April 2019, the government of the Bahamas will outsource this service to a private entity, as initiated by my predecessors, at an annual cost of $4,215,000. I'm simply reporting. Oh. The port will levy a mandatory tug fee for all cruise and other large vessels assessing Prince George Wharf. In addition to funding required for port upkeep and tugboat repairs, substantial repairs were effected to the Yokohama fenders at a cost of $179,471.30 over the 6-month period ending December 2017. These repairs and new fenders are required, a tugboat and barge, and 90% of the work was done at night. Other repairs carried out by the Port Department included the maintenance and upkeep of the Grand Bahama and Marsh Harbor Port offices at a cost of approximately $6,000, and the repair and replacement of the air conditioning units at the port's administrative building in New Providence and in Marsh Harbor, Abaco. In this regard, the 2 new air handlers were installed at the Port Administration Building at Prince George Wharf, and a new 5-ton air conditioning system was replaced in Marsh Harbor Port Department at a cost of $59,000. Maintenance was also carried out to the lighthouse grounds at the San Salvador Lighthouse at a cost of $30,305. And sunken areas were addressed at the Prince George dock. And a sunken wreck was removed in Mangrove Key, Andros. Mr. Speaker, undoubtedly, the most challenging issue faced by the Port Department during this 6-month term budgetary period has been the event which took place in September of last year, when on September 18, 2017, a non-motorized cargo barge, the Mariner 1, became grounded off Grays, Long Island, resulting in diesel oil spill which impacted the northeastern coast of Long Island. The barge was owned by RR Caribbean Marine operators from Trinidad and was contracted by Digicel to transport hurricane relief items from Trinidad and Tobago to the island of Anguilla. While en route to Anguilla, the tugboat responsible for the transport of the cargo barge developed difficulties, resulting in a separation from the cargo barge, resulting in the cargo barge becoming grounded in Long Island. As a result of the grounding, $49,485 was spent by the Port Department to effect some initial cleanup. However, additional cleaning is required to the site. Mr. Speaker, my ministry, Exuma, so you could have your questions answered, Exuma. That's why I want you to pay attention. My ministry has taken all measures to have the owners of the barge remove the grounded vessel, and has also secured the services of the Attorney General to issue a letter to the owners, giving them a deadline by which the vessel was to be removed. As a consequence of the owner's failure to do so, the Office of the Attorney General was advised to commence legal proceedings against the owners of the vessel. The assistance of the Bahamas Maritime Authority has also been sought in this matter, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has also been requested to petition the government of Trinidad to require its nationals to honor its obligations under the International Maritime Organization protocols. Despite these efforts made by the Port Department and the Ministry of Transport and Local Government, the Port Department remains ever aware of its responsibility to ensure that the vessel is moved from the marine environment while it awaits relief via diplomatic or other channels, and sought to obtain initial estimates to have the vessel cut up and removed, a cost of which is likely to exceed $500,000, I'm advised. Exuma, you and I had a conversation, and unlike others would have done in this house, I'm not going to present that conversation. But hearing the figure mentioned here, Exuma, I wish for you and I at the appropriate time to continue that conversation. Agreed? Thank you. The request by the port for estimates from 7 companies did not produce the desired result, and the port has now engaged in a second exercise of seeking to identify qualified salvors to remove and dispose of the wrecked barge. Mr. Speaker, the Port Department remains committed. I remain committed to having that matter resolved in the soonest. The Port Department remains challenged in this capacity to effectively monitor maritime activities throughout the Bahamas, as it is mandated to do, and to establish, and Mr. Speaker, by the way, while speaking about the matter in Long Island, I would be remiss to not mention a matter of concern for MP Albury, the good member for Central and South Abaco, who has an issue with a sunken vessel. However, I'm advised that this is a local vessel. The local owner is engaged, and that matter is to be resolved as soon as weather permit. Mr. Speaker, the Port Department, as I mentioned, is challenged in its capacity to effectively monitor activities throughout the Bahamas, as it is mandated to do so, and to establish and staff new port offices in Bimini, and let me say, as it relates to Bimini, during our last visit, we made the announcement. The port director was there along with the road traffic controller. Persons were asked to come forward, and persons were interviewed. Applications were provided. I'm satisfied that in the shortest possible time, persons will be identified and an office will be up and running there. In Exuma and Great Harbor Key in the Berry Islands, efforts will continue in the new budgetary period to deal with these offices, as it is undoubtedly the case that the department is losing millions and millions of dollars in revenue each year due to its inability to cover these areas at this time. It is also important for me to advise, Mr. Speaker, that the port is similarly challenged in its efforts to operate the Prince George Wharf, and the government has announced, and you would have heard the good member for Freetown mention, its intention to enter into a public-private partnership to operate that critical facility along the lines of the agreement established at the Lyndon Pinling International Airport for the operation of that facility. In this regard, the outsourcing of tug services at Prince George is but the first in many steps in the modernization of that facility. Under the new dispensation, the port will continue to serve as the regulators, but it will no longer be responsible for the service delivery. We will resolve this issue of 2 ministries operating in silos and have one entity that is able to properly negotiate. I'm guessing you want that to stay in Southern Shores? All right. Mr. Speaker, many persons will be aware of the challenges faced by the Port Department in regulating commercial water sports activities on Paradise Island and in Cable Beach, as there have been numerous media reports of criminal and other dysfunctional behavior on the beaches by some, maybe a few, water sports operators, particularly operators of jet skis. Additionally, it is also the case that there is a need to shore up the regulatory regime for the inspection of private recreational watercraft which operate in Bahamian waters. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that my ministry will proceed with legislation developed under the former government, my predecessor, for the introduction of the Commercial Recreational Watercraft Amendment Act, and with the Water Skiing Motor Boat Control Act. I have continued during my tenure to advise that governments are continuous, Mr. Speaker. The interests of the Bahamian people are of greatest importance, and it is important that we do not, as a nation, throw out the baby with the bathwater. Mr. Speaker, permit me now to address initiatives undertaken by the Bahamas Maritime Authority. Exuma, you got jokes.
Are you in a position to share it with this honorable house?
Private, that's a private matter. Mr. Speaker, permit me now to address initiatives undertaken by the Bahamas Maritime Authority during the period being discussed. The BMA is certainly one of the Bahamas' success stories. As of 31st December 2017, the Bahamas remained the world's 6th largest flag with 1,540 ships totaling over 61 million gross tonnage, with a diversity of ownership and type of ships representing the global nature of the industry. It is worth noting that the Bahamas has the world's largest percentage of ships with 122 cruise ships registered and a further 30 cruise ships that are on order with companies such as Royal Caribbean, Disney Cruise Lines, Silver Seas, Genting, Crystal Cruises, Seabourn, Lindbald, Sunstone, and the newcomers Virgin Voyages. The ability to continue to attract and maintain this valuable and prestigious business is a major achievement for the country and a firm endorsement of the excellent service provided by the Bahamas Maritime Authority. I'm pleased to advise, well, she had hand in that. I'm pleased to advise, Mr. Speaker, that on the occasion of the IMO Assembly, the Bahamas was able to retain its seat on the IMO Council in Category C. The Bahamas re-election represents a significant achievement, not only for the nation, but regionally for the Caribbean and globally for small island development states, whom the Bahamas will strive to ensure equal representation during international meetings. Council representation enables the Bahamas to be at the forefront of decision-making on issues that will impact all industry stakeholders, including our ship owners. The importance of this role as a regulator is immeasurable. The process to garner the support and confidence of the voting IMO member states was a Bahamian interagency collaborative effort undertaken by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Transport and Local Government, and the Bahamas Maritime Authority. It is important for me also to state, Mr. Speaker, that the BMA's 2017 contribution to the IMO was $1.8 million. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the IMO re-election, the Bahamas has also been awarded the Qual Ship 21 status by the U.S. Coast Guard for the year 2017-2018. This achievement is a testament to the BMA's work with its ship owners and operators and their efforts to ensure that their ships meet the high-quality standards required by the United States Coast Guards of vessels that visit U.S. ports. Mr. Speaker, this Qual Ship 21 status allows for ships flying our flag to be exempted from certain scrutiny because they are satisfied that once a ship is flying the Bahamian flag, it is indeed in alignment with those necessary standards. And so that is a testament to our flag and the work of the BMA. Other accomplishments by the BMA during the period 2017 include the planned expansion of its market presence in the Far East via the establishment of a Tokyo office to complement the Hong Kong office. It is expected that the short-term financial expenditure required for the opening of this office will be offset by the increase in tonnage over the long term. As important, Mr. Speaker, is the BMA's investment in the development of maritime careers for Bahamians. This investment for the period ending December 2017 was $250,000. And this would have been investment in the LJM Maritime and other institutions that are involved in the training of Bahamians who are involved in the maritime industry. Mr. Speaker, as I take my seat, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the contributions of one Commodore retired Davy Roll as I boast of the accomplishments of the BMA. Commodore Davy Roll retired, spent 8 years there, and he brought innovation, he brought discipline, he brought the BMA to where it is, to the extent that his departure did not necessarily necessitate an immediate replacement, but one of his proteges, one of the persons who worked along with him, Captain Dwayne Hutchison, was able to just slide right in and assume the role acting until a final decision could be made. So at this time, I would really love to ask this House to give Commodore Davy Roll a round of applause. Commodore Roll, wherever you are, hopefully fishing in your short pants and slippers, I thank you on behalf of a grateful nation. Mr. Speaker, I trust that this presentation satisfies Exuma in particular, who made reference to the only thing I did in the Ministry of Transport was save $25 million while so many other things was going on. I trust that now Exuma has a different view of what transpired in the Ministry of Transport and Local Government. Exuma, I want you to know publicly that as an individual, I'm open to work with all. As a retired policeman, I was satisfied to live on my policeman's pension. I was satisfied that I would be able to afford my yellow grits, which is the only yellow thing I like, by the way. My yellow grits and sardine and tuna for the rest of my life. And so I want you to know, well, you can't take that pension away. I catch too much draft for that. Bullets, graces, and all. So you can't take that away. But I want you to know that I am open to working with all, any and all who has a genuine interest for the benefit of the Bahamian people. And I want to go back to a point, Mr. Speaker. I would have mentioned that our re-election to the IMO was a collaborative effort between various agencies. But there was something, Mr. Speaker, I think that made a significant difference. I saw the smiles on the faces as we hosted a luncheon. We hosted a luncheon at the BMA, at the IMO, and as I stood on the receiving line, the staff would say, Minister, this is so-and-so from the German embassy. And I was able to say, Guten Morgen in Germany, and they smiled. Mr. Minister, this is so-and-so from the Peruvian embassy. And I was able to say, Buenos dias, bienvenidos. Mr. Minister, this is so-and-so from the French embassy. And I was able to say, bonjour. Mr. Speaker, the point I'm making, Mr. Speaker, is we are now, notwithstanding our size, we are now swimming in this large pool with the big boys.
Yes.
We have been and will continue to punch above our weight, Mr. Speaker. We must now start to accept that communication is an essential part of our success if we are to succeed. We must now be satisfied that English, Mr. Speaker, while it is the most spoken language in business, it is not the only language in business. And we must sensitize our young persons in particular of the importance of being bilingual or being able to speak more than one language. But Mr. Speaker, when we so-called educated and informed leaders find ourselves, because of petty politics, finding it necessary to criticize somebody because he speaks another language, we're discouraging our young ones. We are saying to them that it's a bad thing to be able to speak another language. I trust, Mr. Speaker, that as we advance as a nation, we mature to the point where we are able to commend and herald those who are doing a thing that might be of benefit to our nation, that through encouraging this might inspire others that it is okay, that it is a good thing. Mr. Speaker, as I take my seat, permit me to say what an honor it is for me to serve as the minister responsible for transport and local government, to have the awesome responsibility to touch and improve in a substantial way the lives of every Bahamian resident and visitor in these islands. In this regard, I express my gratitude to the member for Kalani, the Honorable Prime Minister, for having entrusted me with such an awesome responsibility. And last but by no means least, I wish to convey my gratitude to the wonderful people of Southern Shores for having elected me to serve in this esteemed place. And I assure them, as I would have said in the beginning, Mr. Speaker, I will continue to have nothing but love for them. I will continue to act by the mantra of the slogan that I personally chose during the campaign, here for all of us. It is my pledge that I will continue to work for and on behalf of the Bahamian people and, of course, Southern Shores, who elected me. Mr. Speaker, Southern Shores supports the midterm budget.